Hi, everyone. I am going to kick this off with a question, and I invite you to type some responses into the chat area. What are some words you would use to describe the notion of innovation? And don't think too much, just a few words that come to your mind. While you type those, I'm going to pull up the Wikipedia definition, which is it's a new method, idea, or product. Robert says creative. I see a creativity, differentiation, fail fast, cutting edge, useful, something new, really fast, courageous, experiment, novel. All of these are correct, right? Here are a few words that are used to describe innovation. And there are words like transformation, metamorphosis, rearrangement, restructuring, novel, modern, etc. And I think the reason there are so many words to describe the idea of innovation is because it is such a crucial part of our vocabulary. Some questions for you to ponder, and you don't have to type this in the chat area. When was the last time you worked on something that you deem innovative? What did it result in? And typically, with what frequency do you work on an innovative idea or product? Think about these at the back of your mind, and I'm hopeful that by the end of this presentation, you will walk away with a few strategies that you can take back to your team, your organization, or just for yourself to be able to create an environment that fosters innovation. Here's the next question, and again, I invite you to type some responses into the chat area. Why do we innovate in the workplace? Why do it at all? So folks who are just dialing in, the question is, why do we innovate in the workplace? Moves the ecosystem forward. Daniel says to optimize and be efficient. Peter says it make things better. Some folks say it's growth, to survive, to keep up with the world. Right. All of these, again, are correct. Innovation is vital because it gives companies an edge. It challenges the old ways of solving problems. It changes the status quo. It increases efficiency, like somebody said. And it's how we evolve at the workplace. Innovation in the tech industry is a bit of a loaded term. Even when we are not actively innovating, our brains are thinking about newer ways to solve old problems. In technology, when we say innovation, we're not referring to achieving our already aggressive goals. In the true semantic sense, we are innovating when we're executing against business goals or well-defined problems. In this talk, however, when I'm referring to innovation, I'm really referring to accelerated experimentation. Now, you might be wondering, if innovation is so important, why aren't all dev, product, and design teams doing this 100% of the time? Well, because innovation is not free, right? It is a risky undertaking. When you're starting something new or have a small number of users, it's easier to be scrappy and do rapid prototyping. But once the product or service is mature and out in the wild, there are usually paying customers that expect continuity of service, and there are SLAs to be respected. These are important to maintaining the brand value. Tech firms will typically staff appropriately to keep the business running, or in tech speak, KTLO, to keep the lights on. When there is a user-facing production issue, there are usually detailed postmortems internally, and a summary with corrective actions to prevent this in the future is shared widely with affected stakeholders. This is done to reiterate that reliability remains a top priority for the company. One of the products my team owns is Bloomberg.com, which has been around for over 2 decades. It's been through its fair share of redesigns over the years and serves several workflows off of its domain. Many of you likely work on large products too, and that have been in production for a while, and can acknowledge that a lot of work goes into maintaining them. Innovating on those can be a slow process because small changes can have unexpected outcomes. And that usually means you have to test diligently. This is not to say that innovation doesn't happen or shouldn't happen. It is to acknowledge that innovation on these can be risky and therefore slow. How did we changed that for Bloomberg Media. At Bloomberg Media, as I mentioned earlier, Bloomberg.com is one of the long-standing mature products with paying customers. Media in general is a fast-growing business where consumers' habits are constantly changing and media evolving to adapt and shape that. So as a media leadership team, we wanted to be able to try new ideas and fail quickly, but without incurring any downtime or reputational risk, because customer experience and support have been the pillars of the Bloomberg brand. So we started something called Beehive, which is, sorry. Trying to switch screen here and ended up losing. All right, I'm almost. Looks like I lost my windows. Just a second. All right, I can advance my slides again. So we started Beehive, which is the innovation lab that's been running now for a few years. The mission for Beehive is data-driven, user-centric innovation for accelerated experimentation and exploration. Beehive is an innovation lab that brings together designers, engineers, UX researchers, and product managers to explore new products and push the boundaries of existing initiatives. Beehive has informed our media digital strategy by uncovering customer insights and trends through research. We'll talk about that in a second, while testing new ideas for upcoming media products and features. Let's take a look at how it works. The team does 5-day sprints. 5 days of the week are spent on a single experiment, starting with understanding the problem space and ending with validating a prototype. Every week, the team does a new experiment, and over a few months, they have a compilation of proposals based on the user testing outcomes. The leadership team can then choose which of these we want to invest in by prioritizing on the app team roadmap to add this to the in-market app. Let's take a look at the activities that happen in these 5 days. Day one is spent on understanding the problem space that the team is trying to solve. They typically break the problem down into multiple how might we questions. This is a research-heavy day, and depending on the problem, it might involve reading research papers, interviewing internal experts, talking to relevant external folks, conducting a user study in Office, or the team going to the user in their environment, running a survey, and other similar exploration. On the second day, the team explores a slew of solutions that they can use to solve this particular problem, leading up to the third day where they decide to pick one of those solutions, right? So they decide to pull on one of the threads for the remaining 2 days of the week. The fourth day, they build a prototype to then put in front of the user on the fifth day to validate or invalidate. Now, I said that they spend the fourth day building the prototype. Building a prototype in a single day, building a working prototype in a single day is hard. In fact, we almost never do that. The team uses a variety of creative options, including mockups, wireframes, and clickable prototypes to demonstrate the user experience, to demonstrate the product's functionality in a way that mimics the actual usage. And here's an example to illustrate this. During one of the experiments, the team was exploring solutions for users to be able to interact with their surrounding objects to get pertinent news and other data without having to type into a search box. This prototype explored an augmented reality experience where image recognition could map back to relevant data sets for the user. In the image, in the slide, the team went to Zara, which is a clothing store, to click some videos. In the same trip to Midtown in New York City, the team clicked short videos at Whole Foods and Starbucks. They then went back to the office and annotated the video, overlaid the video with relevant data. For validation the next day, the team returned to Midtown. These images are from across Bryant Park in Manhattan, where they put the device in the hands of test users. Now, from a user point of view, they have this device that they are pointing to the same box of tomatoes. And even though it's really a video that's playing back, they see tomatoes and then tomatoes with labels. So it's as if it's an immersive AR experience. On the left, they're scanning tomatoes to discover box office data at Whole Foods. And on the right, they're scanning Starbucks for company performance data. This form of quick build and test is crucial to how Beehive lets us do rapid prototyping and user testing. If the testing results indicate that this is worth investing time and resources into, then the team can go back to build a working prototype. And if not, like we eventually decided with this, the team can discard and move on to the next experiment. While we saw a lot of very interesting ideas, very interesting work come out of Beehive that had a lot of business impact, running Beehive in this fashion also had some interesting nuances and challenges. So to give you the full picture, I'll talk about some of the early challenges that we faced. So I mentioned the weekly sprints where the team runs different experiments every week. Let's say they do this for a few months, at the end of which they have a list of promising ideas that we want to explore further. Usually at that stage, so these ideas map back to work that's happening on, or that should be happening on one of the other teams. I run I have a large set of teams, right? There's video, subscription, mobile, OTT infrastructures. There's more than 10 teams. And so often whatever ideas come from Beehive map to one or more other teams. And so they have to be prioritized by the respective teams in order to have something that can be put out in the market. So on one hand, you have Beehive that's doing rapid experimentation. And on the other hand, for these to see their day in production, they have to wait their turn to be stacked against all the other items that might be on these teams' roadmaps. So that's not ideal. And from the team point of view, especially from the developer's point of view, they have to inherit a working or a non-working mockup, have to productionize it, fix all the bugs, and then maintain that long term. So from most of the team's point of view, the Beehive team, the developers on the Beehive team have the better end of the bargain. So my product counterpart and I, as these problems came around, we brainstormed on how we can mitigate these. We didn't want to lose the idea of Beehive. We didn't want to lose the team Beehive because of all the business impact it was having. But we also wanted to acknowledge that some of these are true, are real problems that we can actually mitigate. And so over its course, we have had a lot of different iterations where every time we found that here are little hiccups, and here are ways that we can solve it. Instead of going over each of those iterations, I'm going to jump to where we are with Beehive now. So now we give a theme to the team for a quarter. So an example of a theme is one that I gave them last year was how can they build experiences and products that will draw more female viewers to our news products, to our news platforms. Another one we gave them was how to increase engagement of our users in the Asia Pacific region. So theme is really a prompt for the team to explore solutions within. Every quarter, there are developers and designers that rotate in from one of the other teams into Beehive. So they spend a quarter in that team, work on this particular theme, and then at the end of the quarter, roll back to their home base, roll back to their teams. And while this is not 100% of the case, but very often, most often, at least one of the developers goes back to a team that ends up being the new home of the particular experiment that the team ran in that quarter. And so there's some sense of continuity, there's some sense of ownership where the dev or the team feels like they were a part of the conception. And so they continue adding phase 2, phase 3 and developing it, but not feeling like they inherited something that they didn't really envision. So this model has been working out really well for us. We've been running in this mode for over a year now. The schedule for the quarter is broken down roughly into 3 activities. The first are the weekly experiments. These are very similar to the 5-day sprints we discussed earlier. And as an example, I'm going to break that down further. The first week, the team could run an experiment on the 5th day, which is typically a Friday. They get in front of me and my product partner to present their results, present their findings. And we might give them one of 3 responses, right? The first response is yay, in which case we're telling them this looks great, this is worth exploring further, let's move on to the next phase, which is the execution phase. Or we might tell them no, because we don't want to explore in this particular idea at this time, probably because another team is doing it, or because of these other reasons, right? We give them the reasons and we ask them to go on to the following week to try a different experiment. They get up to 4 shots at this. Or we might tell them, this is interesting, but have you considered this other angle? In which case they go on to the next week to flesh that idea further, flesh that out further. So once they move on to the execution phase, which is where you'll see bulk of the time in the quarter is spent, they are building a production-ready solution. This is no longer a mock-up, right? This is something that we will put out in production in front of the users before the end of the quarter. And then the last phase, which is really a very short phase, is when they are doing demos, documentation, and then transitioning this work off to the team where this will live long-term. So this mode of operations has been in the works for a year now, like I said, a year and change, and it's worked out really well. I will talk about some of the business impact that the work from Beehive has had. So what you see here is a newsfeed style feature in the mobile app that gives users personalized stories every time they open the application. This is Bulletin. It was launched in 2018. And the 3 blurbs that you see are the headlines that were summarized in an automated manner. The stories, one sentence summaries, are written by an AI-powered program that scans the stories for meaning. Right? And here's a different example where the prompt to the team was, what do social news audiences want from a mobile article experience? The team researched this, and the findings from the study led Beehive to prototype and test a mobile web article template designed specifically for people coming to Bloomberg.com via social. In a test run to 5% of our audience, the updated article experience significantly decreased bounce rates. We also saw unintended shifts in the behavior of our test audience. Social article readers in the test were 3 times likelier to share what they read and significantly more likely to read articles through to the end. You'll see before and after images in this slide, where on the right-hand side, the after image has the title pushed up to the top, the images pushed down to the bottom. The typography is a little bit smaller, and bulk of the real estate is spent on the story itself, on the text itself. There's a floating copy link button at the bottom right, which moves as you scroll down the story. And that is what helped in the search that we saw in share usage. Let's look at a different example. Workwise is a new experience delivering personalized data insights about your career. The prompt to the team here was to explore solutions to engage our younger audiences, specifically 18 to 35-year-olds. The team pitch for this was to learn how your salary stacks up and how much your dream job might pay. Try our career calculator. We launched this last year and were pleasantly surprised to see the engagement. You'll see that this is very visual. This is a 4-part survey where the user enters their information, and at the end they're presented with a summary, personalized, based on the responses they have given. It might tell them that they should move to state A to see a 30% bump in their salary, as an example. Another example that I'll share here is the Lunar New Year gift guide. This was actually inspired from the success we saw in Workwise. It is a 3-part quiz, at the end of which the user is presented with some gift suggestions. Under the hood, this uses a lot of the same technical components that we built for Workwise. So to recap this, experimentation is hard with mature products because of the risk it poses. A lot of teams and companies invest time in hackathons or set aside 20% time for the teams to be able to work on something that that they are passionate about. We do this across media. We set aside time for hackathons, and this brings developers, product folks, designers, and editors together. This is very useful, and it's a great creative outlet for teams to be able to pursue projects that didn't get prioritized, or that they didn't get to tie loose ends on, or just build a tool that helps them with developer efficiency. So, this is extremely useful. We continue to do this. However, it is not a replacement for something like Beehive. in my experience, this is something that needs to live along with Beehive. Standalone R&D or innovation teams are rather challenging because when there is a crisis, when there are critical deadlines, in my experience, it's often the standalone innovation team that hits the chopping block. And so my preference is to make these a integral part of the organization, to try and dim the lines as much as possible between where the experimentation happens and where you're putting products out in front of users. And it's not perfect, right? I want to acknowledge that this is not perfect, even with the current rotation model, where there are resources moving from their home teams to Beehive. There is some amount of capacity overhead planning that needs to happen, for the time that they are gone, and then when they come back. So it's definitely not zero cost. However, the benefits that we have seen come out from Beehive significantly outweigh the challenges that come with it. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat area. Pradeep asks, how big is your innovation team, and do you rotate people between BAU and innovation, business as usual and innovation team? The team is the team overall, the organization overall is over 100 people, right? And depending on and we're only rotating a couple of developers. However, depending on the particular Beehive project, we sometimes change. You saw the headline summarization, which was more engineering heavy and less design heavy. And you saw the Workwise project, which is very visual, and we had more design bandwidth there. And so, the ratio varies depending on the project, but typically it is a few developers, a couple of developers, and a designer. There's a dedicated researcher, and there's a product owner as well. Rohit Jain asks, successes are good, but what is the process that generates such innovation? Well, I shared some of the successes, but we do a lot of experiments, right? And not everything is greenlit for its time in production, like the AR, AR experience I shared. There are lots of different ways by which these ideas are generated, both inside Beehive and outside Beehive. The one of the experiments I shared was Workwise, right? And with Workwise, what was interesting was when they got the prompt, the team started looking at where do the younger audiences spend time today when they come to .com. And when they started looking at that, even though on .com we have the bulk of the content there is really articles, news stories. What we found was what the Beehive research team found, that the younger audiences went more often to our company profile pages, right? These pages include information about various public and private companies and their leadership. And this is when they started exploring if the younger audiences were spending more time to figure out what work happens in which company, and also what the leadership looks like. And so eventually this resulted in something like Workwise. But research can start with what analytics do we have about our users today. It can start with doing some interviews to understand, from our sales reps in Asia Pacific, what is the one thing that they would love to have, which will help them engage with their partners, sponsors, etc. Or it can we sometimes will run surveys to get a sense of what makes the user want to come back and check their portfolio every day. What would help them spend time to get to the end of the story, like we did with we call it Project Dora, but you saw the before and after screens. So those are some ways, but in general research, if you just bring a bunch of people together and give them how might we prompts, you will see a bunch of ideas come, and then you want to be able to test quickly and keep reiterating. It looks like I am out of time, but feel free to send me more questions via email or find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.